Episode 3 begins with Makyu, who out of jealousy, advises Yeonhai to stay in the cold palace. As the two are leaving, Young Cheong calls Yeonhai and pretends to be frightened, which makes Yeonhai laugh out loud. Yeonhai immediately orders Soo Hyuk, the royal guard, to cover Young Cheong's head with a sack along with Do Ji-um. At that moment, Young Cheong has no choice but to compliment Hong to ease her fear. After that, the royal physician removes the arrow from Yeonhai's body. Makyu looks worried but secretly takes the arrow away, then politely asks the physician about His Highness's condition. Unfortunately, the physician knows nothing about the medicine that Young Cheong had used temporarily for Yeonhai. He only praises the strange medicine for stopping the bleeding effectively. Makyu then dismisses the servants and warns them not to reveal anything. Afterward, Makyu asks His Highness who had stopped his bleeding. When he learns it was the witch, Young Cheong, she becomes jealous, realizing Yeonhai brought the witch back not because of any crime. Still, Yeonhai insists that in the whole of Joseon, only he wants to punish Young Cheong the most. Even so, Makyu continues to act troubled, saying it's been a long time since His Highness showed such interest. Caught in her feelings, she still insists she has never let him down. Yet, she continues pouring tea and probing with subtle questions. Yeonhai only laughs and says that Young Cheong's place of confinement is even more surprising than the detached palace. It turns out both women are locked up in a corner of the prison, looking no different from criminals after carelessly speaking ill of others. Despite this, the two women comfort each other, saying at least they've been given mourning clothes, which, though plain, are clean, something to be thankful for. When Makyu hears that the witch has been imprisoned, she feels relieved. But noticing how His Highness, who once wanted to punish her, is now treating her differently, she grows uneasy. So, she orders her servant to investigate everything about Young Cheong, from how she met His Highness to why she caught the attention of the overseer Jeong. The servant suggests Makyu simply ask Songda directly to save time, and she agrees to meet him. She then gives an item to her servant, instructing him to deliver it to Grand Prince Jae-san, who was involved in an affair. Meanwhile, in the royal kitchen, where Master Chef Sim is in charge, he makes rounds inspecting the food the assistant cooks are preparing. Even while working, he gossips about the witch brought into the palace by His Highness. Chef Sim is from the third generation in the palace and, thanks to family connections, has been favored. But he now has to compete against another chef, Man, who seems strict, for the position of Royal Master Chef. While the two argue heatedly, Makyu's servant and others arrive, delivering the court lady's food requests. At the same time, Yeonhai's grandmother learns that he punished the inspector, Jeong Hong, for disrespecting the throne. She worries that His Highness may have acted out of personal resentment. Meanwhile, Makyu sits in the palace, still thinking about the witch. No matter how hard she tries, she cannot figure out what kind of person Young Cheong really is. Songda then arrives to speak with Makyu. He tells her that His Highness simply wanted to bring the witch into the palace, though he does not know the reason. This only makes Makyu more curious. When she learns Young Cheong is just a cook, she sets the matter aside. She then opens a chest of treasures seized from Grand Lady Hong, but complains it isn't enough. Songda promises to bring more once he gathers it. Makyu demands that all the slaves belonging to Inspector Hong's household be delivered from the Hong estate. This troubles Songda, as doing so will surely cause objections from the other inspectors. But Makyu insists, leaving him no choice but to obey. Because of this, Songda later complains to his father that their family is being treated like servants by Makyu. However, his father believes being servants in such comfort is worth a lifetime. Songda, on the other hand, is dissatisfied with his current position. He believes His Highness will soon take interest in the witch, causing Makyu to lose her place. That night, an intruder breaks into the prison. He defeats the guards and successfully frees the two women. Wearing a mask, his face is hidden, so Young Cheong and Do Ji-um have no choice but to follow him in order to escape. When the palace guards discover the escape, they raise the alarm and begin searching. Meanwhile, the two women run after the masked man. The night sky is beautiful, filled with glowing fireflies. Hearing the news of the witch's escape, Makyu panics, while His Highness rushes to the scene. At the same time, Young Cheong and Do Ji-um encounter a group of masked people who appear to be joyfully dancing. Fireworks explode like a festival. Do Ji-um, not knowing who these people are, decides to blend in with them for safety. Suddenly, the masked man asks if they are enjoying the walk. Young Cheong immediately demands to be released. To her surprise, the one asking is none other than His Highness himself. And the man who freed her from prison turns out to be Gongdi. He is known in history as the mysterious clown of the tyrant Yeonhai. The moment Do Ji-um sees Gongdi, she falls head over heels. His Highness even rewards the troupe of clowns, saying they made the night lively. Gong Di winks at Du Jium, making her faint on the spot. Only then does Yang Qiong recall that Gong Di is the very character from the story The King and the Clown. Meanwhile, Du Jium continues to be utterly smitten with him. Gong Di excuses himself, saying he will celebrate with the reward money, but hidden inside his pouch is a letter from His Highness. In it, His Highness asks Gong Di to investigate the assassin who tried to kill him in the forest. Yang Qiong, angered, cannot hold back her tongue and scolds His Highness. As a result, she is sentenced by His Highness, who orders hot irons to be prepared for her punishment. Meanwhile, Makyu witnesses His Highness organizing a grand ceremony. While Du Jium scolded Yang Qiong for her careless words, His Highness suddenly pointed at her and ordered the hot iron be brought toward her instead. Du Jium was dragged out by the guards and tied to a chair, panicking as she begged Yang Qiong to save her. Desperate, Yang Qiong knelt down and promised His Highness she would never try to escape again. Thanks to this, His Highness spared Du Jium and forgave Yang Qiong for her reckless mouth. Yang Qiong asked to return to the prison, but His Highness refused. Instead, he demanded to eat a meal cooked by her own hands. Yang Qiong then requested that Du Jium be allowed to assist her as an assistant cook. Because he wanted good food, His Highness agreed, on the condition that the dish must be even better than the steak at the royal kitchen. When asked about his favorite dish, he launched into a long lecture about principles instead of answering directly. Standing nearby, Makyu fumed with jealousy, her face twisted with displeasure. Songda also watched and began plotting ways to drive them apart. On the way to the kitchen, Yang Qiong wept as she remembered her father. Though she told herself to stay strong, her tearful face betrayed her sorrow. The two girls hugged each other for comfort, consoling their bittersweet fate. They encouraged each other, saying they must cook well if they wanted to survive. The kitchen supervisor, Zhang Xian, brought them in, leaving the entire kitchen staff stunned that His Highness had brought the two of them inside. Many of the chefs feared they might lose their own positions. But since it was His Highness's order, they had no choice but to storm off angrily. Knowing full well they weren't welcome, the two girls stayed quiet. When they checked the pantry, they found mostly spices. However, Du Jium's sharp nose caught the smell of meat, surprising the supervisor. Yang Qiong spotted some scraps, tasted them, and realized it was venison. When questioned, the supervisor admitted it was from the deer His Highness had hunted recently. Yang Qiong then decided to prepare her specialty, venison steak. She began gathering ingredients, minced onions, pears, and more. She even shaped rice into neat molds, with Du Jium carefully helping her every step of the way. But as soon as the dishes were ready, some in the kitchen muttered that disaster was sure to follow. Meanwhile, Yanhai's grandmother heard that the witch had been brought back to the palace and then sent to the royal kitchen. She grew anxious. Makyu also heard the news and learned that His Highness was captivated by the dish Yang Qiong had once cooked at the inspection bureau. She immediately ordered her people to check for any mistakes, then summoned her aide Chu Gan to prepare for a meeting with His Highness. Realizing she was now being favored, Makyu began scheming even more. Meanwhile, Yang Qiong, dressed neatly in her new uniform, personally served the food to His Highness. There, a woman named Man Yi, who seemed to be in charge, looked on. Yang Qiong remained extremely cautious in front of the tyrant of Joseon. She explained that the lavish meal was prepared in the French style. The king of Joseon, unable to understand French, only looked confused. So Yang Qiong personally prepared and presented the dishes to His Highness, explaining that it was an omakase meal. When Man Yi tasted the food first, her face could not hide her surprise. Yanhai then tried a bite of the raw venison and felt as if he had been transported into a vast meadow. His expression was filled with pleasure. The second course was a thick soup. Again, Man Yi tasted it first, then praised it highly. Only then did His Highness take a spoonful. With just one sip, it felt to him like wandering through a field of fresh beans in the morning sunlight. Unable to resist, he praised it as exquisite. The main course followed. Though Yang Qiong's French sounded like sarcasm to His Highness, he didn't complain. He obediently waited while she grilled the meat. Watching her, he grew curious about where she had come from to possess such refined skills. Of course, when she honestly said she was from the future, he didn't believe her. Man Yi wanted to taste the dish too, but His Highness refused, insisting that Yang Qiong tasted herself first to prove it wasn't poisoned. Without fear, she did. As Yanhai watched her eat, he remembered his mother, Queen So-Hien, who used to lovingly feed him when he was a child. Overwhelmed by the memory, he ordered Yang Qiong to serve him directly. His face lit up with happiness as he ate. Afterward, he asked how she knew exactly what he liked. Embarrassed, Young Cheong explained that she had studied the legendary tyrant Yan Hai in order to win the cooking competition. But Yan Hai had no idea that Yan Hai the tyrant was the very title history would later give to him. Meanwhile, Makyu arrived at the dining hall, only to be stopped by guards. Furious, she tried to enter but was denied. Peeking inside, she saw Yan Hai smiling warmly at Young Cheong, and her face fell. She pretended to stay polite, saying she had brought a precious painting from her home, but since she was not allowed inside, she would take her leave. Yan Hai did not stop her. Instead, he coldly told her to return to her own residence, making Makyu storm away in anger. Sensing the tense situation, Young Cheong tried to excuse herself, but His Highness pulled her back, leaning close enough to fill the air with ambiguity. He then declared, "I choose you." Young Cheong was left utterly confused. Outside, she misunderstood his words, worrying she had somehow been chosen as a royal consort. Only when Songdo approached and explained did she realize it was all his doing. Songdo wanted her to become his ally and serve as his informant, but she immediately refused. Knowing Makyu would surely target her, he urged Young Cheong to join forces with him for protection. Finally, he promised he would secretly watch over her, as long as she agreed to be his ally. Reluctantly, Young Cheong agreed, but only on the condition that Songdo help her recover her handbag. After some effort, Songdo finally realized that thing turned out to be the bundle that had fallen off the cliff. Makyu was still upset about losing favor, so Chugan suggested asking Royal Chef Man to discipline Young Cheong in the royal kitchen. That night, Royal Chef Man secretly tasted the leftovers of the demon girl's food and was astonished at how delicious it was. Meanwhile, Young Cheong couldn't start a fire because the wood was wet, so she was scolded. To make things worse, Royal Chef Man played a trick by releasing a snake to scare her. Luckily, Ju Jiam grabbed the snake by its head and saved her. But then, he released it again just to frighten Young Cheong even more. Exhausted, the two girls returned to the prison and even put the shackles back on themselves, sitting quietly. They felt the prison was still better than the royal kitchen, but remembering the cruel tyrant Yan Hai, they had no choice but to accept their fate. The next morning, the king dressed up handsomely and received a petition from an official demanding the execution of the witch. However, Yan Hai refused, insisting that the decision of when to execute her was his alone. He then summoned the court and called Young Cheong to appear. During the session, officials complained about Lao Hong being exiled and demanded the execution of the witch. They also urged His Highness to revoke Lao Hong's exile, but still insisted on killing the witch. This made His Highness feel disrespected, but he still ordered Young Cheong to be brought in. Even though Chu Gan had warned her about the coming execution, he couldn't help but laugh. Eventually, Young Cheong was brought before the court, and just like the opening scene of episode 1, Yan Hai officially appointed her as the Grand Royal Chef. The officials buzzed in shock. Everyone feared that if she turned out to be as cunning as Makyu, they would all suffer. And now, seeing His Highness favoring yet another woman, their resentment only grew. When Makyu heard that the witch had been promoted, she went mad and ran to Yan Hai's grandmother to gossip about how His Highness had been shot by an arrow. She even hinted that the witch was the root of all problems, pushing the Grand Queen Mother to get involved. Makyu suggested that the Grand Queen Mother should test the witch's skills, and the Queen Mother herself grew curious about Young Cheong's talent. Taking this chance, Makyu prepared herself carefully, waiting for orders. Young Cheong and Du Dewey were brought to a palace chamber, where they stayed together. To their surprise, it was warm, with soft bedding, completely different from the prison. The two hugged each other in tears, relieved at the change. They were then given the uniforms of the Grand Royal Chef, made of silk, which delighted them both. Meanwhile, the older royal chefs in the kitchen frowned, upset at losing their position of power. Royal Chef Gam decided to do everything possible to drive Young Cheong away. The next morning, Young Cheong and Du Dewey dressed properly and prepared themselves. Du Dewey was thrilled because thanks to Young Cheong, she was now serving as a lady-in-waiting in the royal kitchen. They encouraged each other to do their best. Young Cheong wasn't afraid of the chefs who wanted to put her down. Royal Chef Man deliberately made mistakes while cooking. Others mixed salt with ashes and hid all the spices and good meat. When the Grand Royal Chef officially introduced Young Cheong, they still bowed politely in front of him. But as soon as the superior left, they dropped their courtesy, mocking that a woman like her could never handle a kitchen. Knowing that the kitchen had about 390 people, barely the size of a large hotel, Young Cheong ignored their taunts and declared herself the Grand Royal Chef. She ordered them all to introduce their positions. Then, she told them to cook while she simply stood there eating an apple. When criticized for not giving orders, she calmly replied that she was only sent there to sit, so she would sit. As for the work, those who had been doing it could continue doing it. Her calm attitude left the chefs speechless. Some were even so nervous they nearly dropped their ladles. Panicked, they quickly rushed back to gather the ingredients and knives. Soon after, young Chiyong was summoned to meet the Grand Queen Mother. The moment she entered the palace filled with women, she felt the tense atmosphere. The Grand Queen Mother told her that she must take a test of skill, as she couldn't understand how young Chiyong could possibly have enchanted His Highness. Young Chiyong bowed politely and explained that she was not a witch, but then she learned that if she failed this test, she would lose her hand. Terrified, she realized she had no choice but to join a cooking competition with the other chefs. She knew this was all arranged by Makyu to eliminate her. Meanwhile, Gong Di met with His Highness and delivered a letter from the scholar Gongul. It requested His Highness to visit and read a historical manuscript that could reveal the truth behind his mother's death. Songda also reported to His Highness that young Chiyong would lose her hand if she failed the cooking test organized by the Grand Queen Mother, with Makyu scheming in the background. Meanwhile, young Chiyong entered the contest under immense pressure because the Grand Queen Mother was notorious for being impossible to please when it came to food. Just as preparations were about to begin, His Highness suddenly appeared, shocking everyone. He boldly declared that the Grand Royal Chef was appointed by him, and that the Grand Queen Mother had overstepped her authority. He even added that the other chefs should also lose their hands if they lost. But the Queen Mother argued that the other chefs were already recognized, while the new Grand Royal Chef still needed approval from the royal court. Yanhai ignored her completely and ordered that aside from today's winning chef, everyone else would lose their hands. A chopping board was brought out, making young Chiyong clutch her arm in terror, wishing she could run back to her father. The bell rang, marking the start of the contest, forcing young Chiyong to step forward. His Highness watched her intently, believing that if she truly came from the future, she would still have to prove her ability. The competition was about to begin with the Grand Queen Mother announcing the theme. However, she appeared unsteady, dizzy, and frail as she moved. Finally, she managed to hold a brush and scribbled the theme on paper. The paper was then hung up high, displaying one enormous character: filial piety. This meant that the dish had to express devotion to one's parents. With tofu and fermented soybean paste as the main ingredients, the chefs were given 1 hour to prepare their dishes. The contest between the 3 chefs began. Young Chiyong focused and remembered the soybean paste spaghetti her father used to make. She was confident that the Grand Queen Mother would like that dish. Looking at the king's face, which was both arrogant and handsome, she saw him smirk at her, which only annoyed her more. Determined, she rushed ahead of the other 2 chefs to secure the best ingredients. Meanwhile, the Grand Queen Mother mocked His Highness, saying it was shameful for him to be close to someone like the witch. But His Highness only smirked and openly defended young Chiyong. Knowing his grandmother had lost her appetite and was simply playing tricks, he was eager to prove the skills of the Grand Royal Chef he had appointed. He sat there smiling smugly, as if he had already won. In the kitchen, young Chiyong struggled against the 2 male chefs. They hoarded all the soybean paste, leaving her with nothing but scraps. One busied himself with choosing fish, while the other wrestled with the chicken. Young Chiyong gathered almost all the ingredients she needed, but was still missing the soybean paste. Feeling helpless, she noticed a pile of spinach nearby. Remembering that spinach was good for anemia, which the Grand Queen Mother suffered from, she quickly grabbed it. Unexpectedly, she encountered Elder Teat Lai and asked him for some soybean paste since the others had taken it all. He revealed that there was a jar of 3-year-old fermented soybean paste in storage and invited her to follow him to get it. Meanwhile, the other courtiers sat drinking tea, gossiping about the chef's contest. The 2 other chefs had already begun preparing their dishes. One was skillfully working with chicken, the other with fish. Only young Chiyong's table was still empty, making His Highness worry. One chef filleted fish diligently, the other simmered bones. Both continued cooking while mocking her. At last, young Chiyong returned. She tied on her apron, took a deep breath, and began kneading dough to make fresh noodles. While the other 2 shouted and bustled, the nobles above leaned forward in curiosity. When she let the dough rest, many doubted her, saying noodle making was too simple. They whispered that her method was foolish and that she might lose her hand, making His Highness glance down in concern. The other 2 were praised for their skills, but His Highness remained the only one who trusted young Chiyong. He said her cooking had always amazed him, and he wanted his grandmother to taste it. Because the tongue can lie, but the taste buds cannot, young Chiyong remembered the elder's words as she cooked. She recalled that the Grand Queen Mother had poor taste and often cried after entering the palace. The last dish her mother had cooked for her was a soup with soybean paste. Her mother had mixed rice into the soup, giving it a light sweetness. Other chefs had tried to recreate the flavor, but none had satisfied her. This made Yang Xiong wonder, should she try to cook something both light and sweet, or was it only because it was her mother's last dish that it had tasted that way? Caught up in thought, Yang Xiong fell behind, giving Makyu a chance to mock her. One old chef used up all the scallions, then came to borrow some from another, but he stubbornly refused. They fought over the scallions until they went flying everywhere. Seizing the chance, the chef snatched the scallions and ran. Yang Xiong, stepping carefully on the ground, sensed something and looked over her ingredients, realizing she had enough to make broth. She wanted to fetch more ingredients, but the palace maids grabbed her and dragged her before the Grand Queen Mother. His Highness asked what ingredients she needed, but Makyu immediately objected, claiming it was unfair. Yang Xiong argued back, pointing out that the rules did not forbid taking more ingredients. She wasn't copying anyone else's dish, yet the other women still opposed her. Surprisingly, His Highness firmly sided with her. But then, he declared that if she took more ingredients and still lost, she would lose both her hands. This left Yang Xiong speechless, cursing the reckless prince who always provoked her. Only after hearing the risk of losing both hands did the scheming women agree to let her continue. Backed into a corner, she had no choice but to accept and ran to get more ingredients. With little time left, she asked Du Duong to fetch them for her. At once, Makyu sent Chu Gan to follow and sabotage her. Meanwhile, Yang Xiong worked on a smoky soybean paste sauce, but the others didn't understand and mocked it as a pointless dish. While the other chefs seared and steamed tofu in refined ways, Yang Xiong fried tofu slabs, which the noble women ridiculed as simply soaking tofu in oil. Little Du Duong hurried to collect ingredients for her, but was tripped by Chu Gan on the palace steps. She fell hard, spilling everything. Chu Gan even pulled out a needle, intending to harm her. When Yang Xiong noticed that Du Duong still hadn't returned, she grew anxious. Meanwhile, Royal Chef Mang had already completed several dishes, and the other chef had presented beautifully plated food, exciting the crowd. Looking back, Yang Xiong added spinach to the soup. The others openly ridiculed her. Finally, Du Duong managed to bring the ingredients back for Yang Xiong, though her forehead was bruised red. That story could be explained later. The ingredients pleased Yang Xiong very much, and she quickly tossed them into the pot. No one understood what she was trying to cook. The Grand Queen Mother called her method strange, while the jealous women accused Yang Xiong of poisoning the food. This made His Highness furious, slamming the table to warn them all. The Grand Queen Mother argued that they were only following the rules, but His Highness gave a cold laugh, saying his authority was being challenged. The two of them seized the chance to argue loudly. His Highness knew his newly appointed royal chef was on the verge of being dismissed, so he looked at her with worry, silently praying for her victory. The contest neared its end. As the incense burned out, the gong sounded, signaling that time was up. All three chefs had finished their dishes, and His Highness grew anxious about whether Yang Xiong could hold on to her new title. The first dish presented was steamed dumplings. One official took the first bite, nodded, and the rest of the judges began eating. The women praised it endlessly. But Yanhai quickly identified the ingredients and preparation method, then bluntly commented that the soybean paste flavor was unclear. It turned out the chef had only made soybean paste sauce. Yet Makyu and the Grand Queen Mother praised it excessively. When asked how the dish represented filial piety, the chef delivered a lofty answer full of philosophy, which impressed the women even more. They admired his clever response as if it were a beauty pageant Q&A. Only Yanhai criticized him outright, shaking his head. The second dish was tofu hot pot. Again, a taster tried it first, then the judges joined. More compliments followed, this time because the dish was fried with little oil. The chef used chicken instead of pork, making it less greasy. He had also added cordyceps and blood-nourishing mushrooms. The meaning of the dish was family gathered together, which the women found very moving. Finally, Yang Xiong's dish was served. Seeing only a simple soup, everyone, including the king, mocked her, asking if that was all she had. Unsure whether he was on her side or not, she explained that it was a special soybean paste soup dedicated to the Grand Queen Mother. After the poison tester tasted it and nodded, the Grand Queen Mother and others began eating. The moment the flavor touched their tongues, everyone froze for 5 seconds. His Highness secretly smiled in satisfaction, while Yanhai recognized exactly what Yang Xiong had added. The Grand Queen Mother even tasted it a second time. Makyu, confused by the silence, ordered Yang Xiong to explain her dish. While she eagerly spoke, Makyu grew angry, accusing her of rambling. But then the Grand Queen Mother intervened. firmly declaring that this soup truly represented filial piety. She mixed rice into the broth and ate it tearfully, her eyes turning red. She remembered the last meal her mother had cooked before she entered the palace. At that time, she had cried, not wanting to leave, but forced herself to eat. Overcome by emotion, the Grand Queen Mother wept openly, wondering how Yang Qiyong had managed to recreate the very same soup. She asked about the final ingredient Yang Qiyong had used. His Highness already knew and explained it for her grandmother, making Yang Qiyong beam with joy. Though she quickly tried to hide it, Ma Qiu caught her expression with jealous eyes. The secret ingredient was clams, the very same her mother had once used. This realization made the Grand Queen Mother fully trust Yang Qiyong. She asked questions about the dishes, and Yang Qiyong confidently explained her skills. She mentioned that she had added spinach on purpose, knowing the Queen Mother often suffered dizziness. This thoughtful detail erased all doubts about her. The Grand Queen Mother even suggested that Yang Qiyong continue to cook for her in the future. Clearly, the winner of the contest was Yang Qiyong. She had earned both recognition and deep gratitude. From that day forward, Yang Qiyong was officially confirmed as the royal chef, with no one daring to oppose her anymore. But His Highness, unwilling to spare punishment, ordered the two defeated chefs to place their hands on the blade. Shocked, Yang Qiyong quickly intervened, begging him to stop. Ignoring her pleas, His Highness accused her of disrespect and threatened to punish her as well. The Grand Queen Mother then stepped in, admitting that she had only created this competition to test and teach Yang Qiyong. Still, His Highness insisted that fairness meant punishment must be carried out. Seeing no other choice, the Grand Queen Mother begged him to let the chefs learn from Yang Qiyong instead. All the courtiers knelt, pleading for mercy. Even Yang Qiyong knelt and begged for their lives. Finally, His Highness relented and spared the chefs. Although the Grand Queen Mother invited His Highness for tea afterward, he knew her mercy that day had only come from tasting the soup. Normally, she was still just as harsh as ever. The women mocked Ma Qiu, laughing at her failed scheme, while the Grand Queen Mother grew pensive about Ji Hian's mother. Meanwhile, Ji Hian remembered that Ma Qiu had plotted against Yang Qiyong, so he ordered to be taken to her palace, his face dark with anger. Yang Qiyong, exhausted, was carried back to Shui Lat by Du Duong. The two chefs, grateful for their spared lives, gave her their cushions to rest on. Royal Chef Gam, however, was awkward in showing gratitude. Yang Qiyong teased him by saying she was hungry and wanted dumplings made by him, which made him furious while everyone else laughed. Du Duong congratulated her warmly, then told her what had happened when he went to gather ingredients. He had been attacked. When Du Duong was struck to the ground, Yang Qiyong worried. But it turned out he was safe because Gong Di had saved him, the very man she admired, making her face light up with joy. Meanwhile, Ma Qiu grew anxious about losing her position. She immediately schemed to trap Yang Qiyong. When His Highness suddenly entered, Ma Qiu quickly pretended to be concerned for him, fussing over his headaches. But His Highness cut her off, saying he already knew she was the one who plotted during the cooking contest. Ma Qiu's face turned pale as she knelt in fear. When he demanded to know why she did it, she tried crocodile tears, manipulating the moment with excuses. She even brought up how his mother had been dethroned, causing His Highness to feel faint and fall into hallucinations. But this time, he no longer needed her to calm him. He walked away, leaving her behind. News soon spread in the palace that the masked man involved in the assassination attempt at Kim E Mountain might be Gong Di. The military lords began suspecting him, though they didn't know his true identity. Elsewhere, Songda presented Yang Qiyong with a jewelry box as a prize for her victory in the competition. He reminded her that His Highness loved beautiful women, suggesting she use the jewelry to adorn herself. But this only made Yang Qiyong worried, fearing others would think she was trying to seduce His Highness for favor. Songda grew angry at her innocence, scolding her harshly. In the end, he said he only hoped His Highness would truly enjoy her presence. That night in Shui Lat, people gossiped about His Highness's unexplained dizziness. The physicians found no illness, yet he sometimes trembled, and only Ma Qiu had been able to comfort him. But now that she was about to lose her seat, no one could stop the storm brewing inside him. Only Yang Qiyong understood his pain. She decided to cook fresh pasta that night, hoping to comfort him. She carefully made Italian noodles from scratch and finished with a fragrant dish of pasta. When she arrived, she found the others being driven out. His Highness was furious, ordering everyone to leave. Only she remained, because he had noticed the blue hair tie that revealed her identity as the royal chef. Left alone with him, he eyed her dish suspiciously. She explained it was pasta with soybean paste sauce and clams. He felt insulted, thinking she was making him eat the same thing again. To lighten the mood, young Cheong jokingly gave it an Italian-sounding name, but he misheard it and grew even more confused. Eventually, he allowed her to serve it. When the poison tester didn't collapse, His Highness finally sat down to eat. Young Cheong rolled the noodles for him and handed them over. With just one bite, his mood changed completely. The taste captivated him, and soon he devoured the entire plate, praising the unique flavor, different from the soup earlier that day. She explained it was a dish her father used to make. When asked about her mother, she revealed that her mother had died when she was young, which touched His Highness deeply. Having also lost his mother, he felt a rare moment of sympathy, though young Cheong doubted his sincerity. When asked about her father, she almost spoke but stopped, remembering that the book Vong Van Luke was gone. His Highness grew curious about the book and how it could have brought her to this time. He pressed her to tell him more about the future, but she knew she could not reveal his fate, that he would be dethroned. Instead, she simply advised him to control his anger and live well through the year. That made him laugh. Later that night, exhausted, young Cheong returned to her room. Seeing Zuzium asleep, she gently covered her with a blanket. She thought again about the looming tragedy that would one day cause His Highness to lose his throne, but reminded herself not to interfere. Meanwhile, His Highness wrote in a book, recording every dish his royal chef had prepared. He named the book Vong Van Luke, the very same name young Cheong had often mentioned. The moment he did, the old book in young Cheong's pocket disappeared. Soon after, alarming news arrived. Dijongun had vanished, leaving behind only a death token after being attacked. His Highness realized there were many in the palace trying to cover up the truth about his mother's fate. That night, he sat under the moonlight, drinking heavily until he was overcome with sorrow. His attendant Flo, worried about his health, called for the royal chef. Annoyed at being summoned so late to cook for a drunken king, young Cheong arrived to find His Highness reeking of alcohol. She tried to serve him food, but he pulled her down beside him. With tears in his eyes, he confessed he wanted her to stay with him. As he looked at her for a long moment, he leaned forward and kissed her deeply. This is where the 4th episode ends. As soon as the next episodes are released, you will find them in the upcoming videos. To watch them, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.